Hello everyone, I'm Alicia and I'm honored to be on this panel where we have three artists from the Sculpture Society who are presenting their work as a part of the Sculpture Society Singapore's 20th anniversary show titled reTHINGing Sculpture in Singapore 2021 at the Lim Hak Tai Gallery at NAFA. We are asking artists to rethink or rethink their work, where the exhibition seeks to examine critical questions such as: is there still a clear demarcation between the handmade thing and the conceptual thing? In an increasingly digitized world of social media, to what extent have sculptural objects dematerialized or rematerialized?
Yes, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this panel. And can you please start by introducing yourself and what do you specialize in? Suba, would you like to start?
Yes. So I am Subashri. I am from India and I studied in Singapore for 4 years and I moved back here. I majored in sculpture when I was in art school. And right now I work with ephemeral materials to create sculptures. But it's pretty different from what we learned at school. So this is something that I'm exploring on my own. And I mostly work with food and food materials to explore how I can use that in art and use the qualities of it to, influence and change audience perception. Yeah. Okay.
Nyan Soe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Nyan Soe. I'm from Myanmar and I have been in Singapore for 12 years. I also study art at NAFA and I'm still making sculptures for almost about 10 years. And I'm still making the sculptures and just trying out different medium and trying to understand them and the form that it can carry.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Si Hui. So I've graduated from NAFA Sculpture as well for a couple of years. So now the majority of my practice is sculpture, stone carving. So it's always a format that I return to, like even if I work across many other mediums.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. So I would like to start with my first question. What are your artistic ambitions and what drew you to become a sculpture major in an art school? Nyan Soe, would you like to answer?
Yeah, actually, I never thought that I would study art. I studied chemistry when I was in the university, and then I started getting interest in to find out what is art about. And slowly, I have done a lot of research and do a research on what is sculptures and how about and other art form. And then after that, then I make a decision that okay, I'm going to study sculpture at NAFA, and that's how I get into study sculpture at NAFA at 2010.
That's fantastic. Yes. How about you, Suba?
Okay, so for me, I always knew I wanted to do art, but I did not know I wanted to major in sculpture. So once I came to NAFA, so we had elective subjects and I took sculpture as one of my electives. And then I realized that I really enjoyed making stuff in the workshop. And I was like, I want to major in this. That's how I got into it. And I think I chose this because I knew that I wouldn't be able to learn the same skills if I took up some other major. I mean, that's obvious, but then I just feel like other majors, there would be a possibility of me learning it elsewhere, but then sculpture just seemed like something I had to do at that point in time. So, I took that up as my major. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Si Hui?
Yeah, in regards to how I changed my major to sculpture in school, I think like the thing about 2D works is also a lot about creating depth. So I always find it easier to make like models, objects, rather than representing them in a 2D image. So I would say it's more of a second nature to me, and there is a aspect to the classical workmanship that's very interesting to me as well.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So I would like to ask the next question. Over the years, did the meaning of sculpture change for you? So would you like to start first, Suhui?
Yeah, so I think when you begin by majoring in sculpture in art school, so the fact about creating a sculpture is always there, like school assignments and like whatever you sketch up or conceptualize, you know that it must present itself as a 3D object. So I think over the years, like the importance placed on sculpture has decreased for me. So when I begin thinking about anything, so I don't place any emphasis that at the end of it, it must become a sculpture. It's just a process that somehow always leads there.
How about you, Nyan Soe?
Yeah, I think to me, I think the meaning of the sculpture, I think the way I understand it, I think it's still the same. But to me, on my practice, I think the main it's more like the material has changed, right? So because during the school day we are using a lot of we're still dealing with a lot of traditional material like wood carving, stone carving, and metal weldings and those technique that we are learning. But I think after the graduate, right, then I will approach to the other medium. So my sculpture also become smaller because of the changing of the medium itself. Because the medium and the relationship between the medium and the size of the sculpture keep changing because of the relationship between them. So I think the size getting smaller and smaller after I graduate from school. Yeah, and the mediums and the way that I explore the form also changing.
So for me, I think my definition of sculpture changed in the way that I used to think that, like, when you look at all these Greek and Roman sculptures, they've survived for thousands of years. So I used to think that sculpture is something that's really permanent, that, it would survive the test of time and everything. But after I started working with materials that just rot away and they only exist as documentation, I realized that those could also be called sculptures, and you don't need to be like, you don't need to restrict the definition of what a sculpture can be just to mediums that can survive over a prolonged period of time. So I think that is one of the major ways in which my definition of what sculpture is has changed over the years. But like, I still do enjoy carving wood or welding or making these. I really enjoy working with metal. So I think both like things can still be called sculpture, and yeah, I think that's what I've like learned over these years.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So I would like to ask that many young artists are into conceptual art, where ready-made is, a very key element. So in this context, what does handmade or craft mean to you? And why is making so important? Yeah. Nyan Soe, would you like to start?
I think I used to use a lot of ready-made object also when I was in art school, and even though after I graduate, I use some ready-made object. But after a while, I realized that I can't feel the temperature of the material itself. It's just that it's so ready-made there that I can't really feel or change too much of it. So that's why I try to approach other medium. It's a bit more natural, like wood or like a clay that can change depend on how I manipulate the material itself. And I think the craft itself is quite important because the craft is the way you go into how you understand the material and how you can change the form of the material and added your personal touch onto it, right? I think that's why I think the making is very important in the later part of my practice over the years, because I think the making itself is a way of exploring the form, the material, and the craft and the technical behind, and slowly added your kind of personal thought onto it.
Yeah, so for me, craftsmanship and terms like spirit, aura are like so closely linked together. So like even though not all sculptures are not all artworks are about like process-based practice, but in a sense I think all sculptures are very much about the process and to which like how it formed and how it evolved. Yeah, so even if like say in paintings as well or sculptures, like even if at the end you remove the marks of the hand, like erase the brush strokes, but still it's like it's the accumulation of all the process that leads to the end. So for me, craftsmanship is very important and it's how I connect with the work itself, but I wouldn't say it's entirely about that, but then I feel like it's a very important basis of a lot of my works.
For me, I agree with both of them. I do believe that when you work with the material and you try to understand what it is, you learn new techniques, you learn how the material reacts when you do certain things to it. So the whole process of working with it allows you to change what your end result might be. It's not like you start off thinking something and then you end up with exactly that, but as you use your material it evolves and then you learn new things about it, you learn better ways to work with it. And I think with that your artwork changes, and that basically like increases and improves your skills as an artist. You learn new things each time you make something, which I think would not be possible if you just used ready-mades. I have not used ready-mades in my practice at all. I don't think I've even used it for like a class project or anything. And I really think I do enjoy the process of making. And I think until I started using food and art, I just used materials that were available. Like for example, paints or something that was already available, then I would like use that. But now I've literally started making the materials from scratch and then manipulating that. So I think the process is really important, at least to me. And I agree with Soo in this sense that sculptures are inherently like process based. So that is something that I believe.
That is true. Thank you. So everyone talks about the process of making. So I would like to ask, what is the typical process of your art making, and how long does it usually take, depending on the artwork that you are doing and that you're specializing in? Would you like to start, Subha?
Sure. So for me, again, I think that depends upon the material that I'm using. Like, for example, when I was working with bread earlier, it took me quite some time to understand how to make the proper loaf of bread and how to knead the dough just right so I can use it in my artwork. But then now with onions, I think it was slightly quicker. I don't know why that was, but it just was slightly quicker. So I think the typical process of it just depends upon the material that you're using and the amount of exploring you want to do with the material, and when you decide that you're happy with it, so that you can move on to the next step. You can, like for example, for me, I was like, okay, I'm happy with these petals, I'm going to start making the flowers. So that would be like the next step. So that's a continuation of the process. So I think it just depends upon the material that I'm using.
How about you, Nyan Soe?
Yeah, I think for me, I do enjoy the process of making also. But how I started, I can't. Basically, I just if I don't make something for a while, I think making has become a habit to me. So I think normally I just start with something. It can be a drawing or it can be just a lump of clay. So I'm just keep doing something then until I have some ideas. Then that's how I continue it. Right, then it depends on the material that I'm playing with lah. And how long does it take? I think a bit hard for to finish a big work. Like for example, the shell work that I'm building, like it's almost 10 months, so I haven't finished it yet. I also don't know when I'm going to stop it. but it's more like a small task to me. So I keep making a small little thing, then it accumulates into one big a kind of installations or the sculpture that I make. Yeah.
Suhui, how about you?
Yeah, so in terms of stone carving, like stone itself is not a medium where I really experiment in a sense like free forms or what. So the shapes, the sizes are kind of all premeditated, but when I kind of experiment, I start by making prototypes, like smaller scale, palm size models in styrofoam. So it's much easier, cleaner, faster. So I like through the year, like just like when I just think of random shapes or things I want to experiment, so I always started out with using styrofoam. So I have like a collection of maybe 100 like little foam objects. So not all really became artworks, but like the mess and the collection of it is always interesting and inspiring to just look, and like just look back and review and see how else I can further develop that.
Awesome, great. So we all are in the times of the pandemic, and it's a pretty tough time. So what are your thoughts on art during the pandemic and art in the digital world in a way? And what challenges have you faced? I mean, we all have faced so many challenges. Would you like to start, Suhui?
So it's a topic I've kind of touched upon in my essay research as well. I think this issue is something like artists and especially sculptors would find even more challenging. That is when your medium is so tactile and about the sensory experience. So how do you transfer that over to the digital medium? Yeah.
Great. How about you, Nyan Soe?
For me, I think during the pandemic, I think we all feel quite anxiety and panic during that time, right? So I think probably making art is the only way that it's sort of calming down a little bit, right? Actually, during that time, I'm trying to avoid the digital world a little bit so that I don't absorb too much information, right? So I'm just so-called I just keep let's say I cannot make sculpture during that, I don't have a material or the studio, then I will just transfer my thought into another media, another discipline. Like maybe I will do a Chinese silk carving, and I will translate my feeling into the language, and I will carve it out. It's sort of like releasing it into another medium that I have, or sometimes I just keep drawing something repeatedly. Then after that, I will just cover it up everything with the black. That's it.
I think for me, I agree with what Suhui said when she said that sculpture is like very tactile and it's really difficult to translate that into a digital artwork. I did feel that with my own work as well. When you use onions, you obviously want the smell to come through, and you can't have that with the digital work. So that is something that and the pandemic, like, it's brought up a lot of limitations, so you just have to like learn how to work around it and see what you can do with whatever you do have. So I mean, there have been like times when I just didn't want to do anything, so I was just sitting there and I didn't make any art or do anything. But then there were like these sudden bursts where I would just keep making stuff until I got like something tangible. So I think the pandemic has been it's just been a really strange time. And yeah, as like a person as well as an artist. So yes.
Very true. I agree the part for the person for sure. Um,
Okay. So it is a strange time to be making stuff, because for me personally, since I use food, I kept, like, at the beginning of the pandemic when there were issues with delivery, I used to keep wondering if this was the most necessary, like, useful way to be using food when people out there did not have food, especially like here in India. And that was really strange to me. I was like, okay, I'm also an artist. I still have to make my artwork, and this is my material, and so this is what I have to do. But at the same time, I sort of like had to wonder about the ethics of working with food. And so that's why it was strange to me. But I suppose, like, I mean, I think you find a way around it, or you try to, like, work around it. So yeah, that's what I meant by strange.
awesome. Thank you. So, as we're talking about living in this world of the digital art, Anthony Gormley says that in a digital age, sculpture is the antithesis to distraction. So, do you agree?
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting quote. So, like, part of what I like about sculpture and like installation art is that it really demands attention, and because of its skill, how you move around it. So there, its presence is so significant, and I think that experience is like quite different and less passing than other mediums.
How about you, Nyan Soe?
Yeah, I think the so-called like a stillness of the sculptures, I think is quite important because it exists as a physical thing that for me is around me, because I make sculptures and I'm living it with it. So it's like it's still there. So I have looking at it every day and I am like interacting with it, right? So sometimes it might be a bit frustrated, but sometimes you will find a release from there. So I think, but that's the fun part of making art also, and making sculpture, that kind of interactions between yourself and the work, and the feeling that you get, and the sculpture, it might have taught you something, and you might have putting into your thought inside. It's that kind of two-way interacting make the sculpture that I think is very important.
I think, like, sculpture as a medium is not as forgiving as like other mediums. Like, if you make a mistake when you're using, like, painting on a canvas, you can just paint over it. But then the sculpture, if I carve out extra things, I can't put it back together. So you have to have you have to just be there completely, and therefore it, like Suhui said, it demands like your complete attention. So that's why this statement is accurate.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So, since this exhibition is about rethinking, so what does rethinking mean to you? And how did you use the term rethinking in your artwork for the project that you guys are focusing on? Would you like to start, Nyan Soe?
I think for this project, the title of it, rethinking, for me is more like a kind of a review for my own practice for the past 10 years. I do realize some point, and I also realized that I think making has become a habit since I was at the art school. I didn't know that until I think I start making this work, and and I look back all the artwork that I make in the past, and it has become a habit. And also to rethinking of the material and that I use, because when I was in art school, I used a kind of a different kind of medium. Then after I graduating, I shift to a kind of a printmaking, Chinese silk carving, and all the other media, and two-dimensional medium. So I think I'm trying to rethink of how can I combine all these medium together again, or to to create something that is a bit more interesting, or to let them have a conversation between a different art discipline and the form that it can make. So,
how about you, Suba?
I think as like I agree with Nyan Soe and I also believe that, you know, when you think about the word rethinking, I feel like all artists at some point in time are rethinkers. And it's not just, I mean, it might be a conscious process, but like Nyan Soe said, like it could also be an unconscious process where you look back one day and you're just like, oh, there are so many things, like when did I even make all these things? And so I think artists are inherently rethinkers. So I think I think the title is absolutely accurate.
Suhui?
Yes, and like kind of throughout the year, we like discuss various essays and passages as well. So to me, it's kind of a rethinking of the art object, and like so about how I process it internally. It's kind of like, for me, I think it's a hyper analyzation of each step of my process, and like sometimes like when you're in the flow, it comes easily, but then I find that when you look back, like in each step of the way, there's a decisions that means something and kind of like tied so closely with the art itself, about the concept and about the artwork.
Right. So as you are talking about rethinking in your artwork and in your project, what is the what role does your material or tool play to your practice? Like everyone is specializing in something unique. So how does that join and connect, and how does that make you feel?
I think I mentioned earlier on, I think marble or like stones in general is a material that I'm very drawn to, and because there is such an intensity about the process, like when I'm cutting into the stone in my small like cubicle studio, so I work in this like fog of white clouds, and I would don't know. I think in some way it is kind of a transcending experience, and it gets me into this zone of working, and I find that very fulfilling to work in this medium. And in terms of its significance to my practice, I think like it kind of ties back to the craftsmanship also, like the more time and energy that you put into the work, I find that it just heightens the presence of the sculpture, like no matter how small or how it may resemble any like object that seems mass produced, like there's an aura to it that's very interesting to me.
That's great. How about you, Nyan Soe?
I think to me, I think I'm still in the I'm hunting for the material, I think, over the years and across the different art discipline. So I think material has played quite an important part in my practice also, because I really want to learn how the language in the material itself, right? So how what can it be done, and how can I combine them, right? The material has and how to combine different discipline also, and also sometimes the tool. And because I have been like working with clay for quite a few years, and I have tried different firing technique, and different type of clay will work differently under different kind of firing. So I think I'm still constant experimenting with the material that I have. And also sometimes I think the tools, I have to invent my own tool, because like the team that I'm working on is city and the mountain. So when I'm carving a small city, then I don't know, it's very difficult for me to carve a small window. So I have to make my own tool to carve the small window onto it. So I have to make a small little chopstick, sharpen them into a small one, and make them into a small window, and try to create a big and small window. So when you look at the work, so it has that kind of perspective of it. So I think the tool also quite important, depending on the material that you are playing with.
For me, I think the material that I'm working with right now, as I mentioned before, is just food. So different kinds of food. But then when you talk about the tool, I don't really have a specific tool that I use, because like for the bread thing, I just mostly used my hands because there was nothing else that I could use. But then for the onions now, I'm using a thread and a needle. But then there's a really interesting thing that I was reminded of when Nyan Soe was talking about making his own tools. When in the first year of, on the first day of my first ever sculpture lesson, my teacher thought, I don't know if Mr. Lim thought the both of you the same thing, but then he taught us how to make our own tools, which he could use to carve clay, to do a whole bunch of things. One was a pointy tip and the other one was a flat tip. And it was just so much fun. And when you talk about tool, that's the first thing that always comes to my mind. And so I think making your own tool or using something that you already have in your work is something that resonates with me. But speaking of that, I recently discovered that sandpaper doesn't really work well with my onion flowers. So I've been rubbing it on this rough wall that I have. So I suppose the wall is now my tool. So yeah, tools are just really interesting, and you can make it out of whatever you want.